Welcome to Community Chats, bringing you stories and insights from the heart of Community Living Toronto, a non-profit organization that proudly supports people with intellectual disabilities and their families. We will focus on stories of belonging and inclusion and topics of interest from communities across Ontario and the world. From uplifting moments to breaking barriers, from innovative policies to ideas from leading thinkers, we continue to advocate for inclusive communities and support the rights and choices of people with an intellectual disability.
Hi everyone, it's Brad Saunders, CEO at Community Living Toronto, and welcome to Community Chats. Glad you've chosen to join us today. The story that parents share are one of the best parts of our Community Chats. Each parent of a child with a disability has a journey that they go through, and I'm really grateful for those who are willing to share. Today, I had the privilege of speaking with Sherron Grant, a mom, a wife, an advocate, a teacher, and someone who embodies the values that CLTO aspires to. Sherron and her husband Clovis have started a parent support group called Sawubona. Sawubona's vision is for every Black caregiver of a family member with a disability to feel a sense of belonging. We had a great conversation, and I'm sure you will enjoy it.
Sherron, thanks for joining us today. Glad you could join our Community Chats podcast.
Thanks so much, Brad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really glad you can take time out of your busy schedule. It seems like you've got a lot going on that we hope to sort of discover, learn a little bit more about today. Maybe you can start by just introducing yourself and who you are, a little bit about your family.
No problem. So hello, everyone who's watching or listening. My name is Sherron Grant, and I am an elementary school principal here in the city of Toronto, where I live. I've been an educator now for about 20 years. Actually, yeah, this will be my 20th year anniversary as an educator. I did a whole lot of other things before becoming an educator. One of the most important pieces being a mom. So I'm a mom of two wonderful sons, Isaiah and David. David, my oldest, has given me two beautiful grandchildren. Well, me and my husband, I shouldn't leave him out. Two beautiful grandchildren. My grandson turned 7 yesterday, and my granddaughter turned 4 last month. And our youngest son, Isaiah, is on the autism spectrum. And so a lot of what I was doing before I went back to school to become a teacher was get on that journey of autism, learn more about autism so that I could be an effective advocate for him.
Great. I see you've got your Autism Speaks pin on, which is very good with Autism Month. I guess we're in it, right? Or is
we're in it. Yeah.
It's, as we're recording this. So you said you went back to school and did a lot of things before becoming an educator. What drew you to teaching and education?
It was one of my career aspirations before going back to school. It was teaching, it was law, it was social work, and I'd actually applied to all of those faculties back in the 90s, and I didn't get in. So that was, of course, quite disheartening. But
they missed out.
Oh, thanks, Brad. And so at that time, Clovis and I were dating, my husband Clovis, and so I did the next best thing and I got married. And not long after that, became a parent. And as I mentioned earlier, Isaiah was diagnosed with autism in 2000. I'll never forget. And so I was supporting him for a few years. I was actually running my own home daycare, and which was really beneficial. Financially was a lot for us at the time to have 2 children in daycare because my income just wasn't going to sustain us. So I stayed home, and it was great because I was really able to observe Isaiah and watch him against some of the other children I was caring for to really see and pick up on the milestones he wasn't reaching. And so after, working on that, getting him into school, feeling confident, like, okay, he's got, he's in school now, he's content, he's learning. It was time for me to do me because I realized I'm not the stay-at-home mom type. And a few good friends of mine, one very, very good friend who also is in education, she had a good talk with me as I'm like, okay, help me figure out my life. And she said, Sherron, you need to become a teacher. And I said, why? And she goes, you'll be a lawyer. You'll be a counselor, you'll be an educator, you'll be everything that you've wanted to be and more. And schools need people like you. So I listened to my good bud, shout out to Yannette, and I went back to school, got in this time, and graduated in 2005. And here I am.
Fantastic. 20 years later. That's
Yes,
excellent.
yes.
Now, you talked about Isaiah being diagnosed in 2020. Was Isaiah
Oh,
your
sorry, 2000.
what did I say? 2020. Of course not.
Yes,
20, that's only 5 years ago. Sorry.
no
In
worries.
2020. So was Isaiah your first son or was David?
David's my first.
Okay, so when Isaiah was born, you had some experience as a mom, you'd been through this.
Yes.
So talk about that and sort of learning how you figured out that something was going on there that you needed to investigate. What was that experience like for you and Clovis?
Sure. So what I used to say, and I'll still say is David, our firstborn, he was a textbook kid. So, popular back then is what to expect when you're expecting, what to expect in the first year. So those are like my parenting Bibles. Like, yeah, I read them from back to front. David was a textbook kid. When it said walk, he walked. When it said talk, he talked. He did everything by the book.
Yeah.
Didn't stay that way as he got older, but when he was a baby, he did everything by the book. With Isaiah, we threw the textbook out. Like he didn't do anything according to what was in the book. So the first thing that I noticed, my mommy senses went off, was his speech. He was a toe walker, and I remarked on that, did some research on that, but his speech was lacking. And I'm thinking, okay, you've got a very verbose mom, a very outgoing big brother. We're a very social family, very involved in our church, very involved in community. So we had those outlets, but yet the speech wasn't coming. So we did a couple of years of speech therapy with Toronto Preschool, speech and language back in the day. And after a few blocks of that, the speech still wasn't getting to where it needed to be. And so at our church, there was two ladies at my church who themselves were also teachers. And they observed Isaiah in Sunday school, and they really affirmed everything I was feeling. And they're the ones that suggested that we get him set up for a full developmental assessment. So I spoke to my family doctor because he had really never dealt with anyone with autism. And so, we had a little bit
Your
of
family doc had never dealt with anybody with
never,
autism.
never. And
Oh,
so when
okay.
I brought to him my concerns, and I love him, he's still our doctor, I love him, but he just
Yeah.
didn't have that experience. He didn't have that lens. So his thoughts were, he's a boy, boys walk late. He's a boy, boys toilet late. Don't worry about it. He'll be like David, he'll catch up. But my mommy senses, and plus these ladies at church, I'm like, no, just write me the referral. He needs to get this assessment. So I had to be really firm with my doctor and say, just push it through. Trust my senses. There's something up with my son. So we put him through. I think this was in the spring, April or May. His name came up in the fall. So we did 2 months worth of visits with this whole group of this interdisciplinary team.
Okay.
And then, December, I think it was the 23rd, 2000. Merry Christmas. Your son has autism.
Where did you go for the diagnosis and all that?
It was Shawnacre Clinic.
Okay.
So Scarborough, so we live in Scarborough, so East
Yeah.
Toronto, and I don't even know if Shawnacre Clinic still exists because again, my son is turning 29 this year, and he was diagnosed at 4. So I guess it was like a wing of Scarborough Centenary Hospital, as it was
Okay.
known then. Yeah.
Okay. I'm a West End. I grew up in Etobicoke, so
Okay.
I don't know Scarborough that well, and I always try and get over my Scarborough biases as a West End guy.
I'm just as bad as an East End girl, Brad. So
I
you're just
know,
totally
I know, I know. So December 23rd, right before Christmas, and you said that kind of jokingly now, with 25 years of hindsight. How did that impact you and your family?
It was tough. It was tough, Brad. I mean the language that was used then was PDD-NOS,
Right.
pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. I'm like, what in heaven's
What
name?
is that? Yeah.
What does this alphabet mean? So I went online and searched it up, and then of course the word autism, autism, autism comes up. I start reading all the trajectories, which were not good.
Yeah.
talking about institutionalization, talking about, kind of like, yeah, just institutionalization, not giving back to community, just very hopeless responses on the web with regards to the future outcomes, the future life choices for someone with autism. And my son was, he's not a high functioning young man. He didn't go to college or university. He doesn't still have a lot of language. He has a lot of gifts, a lot of skills,
Yeah.
but unfortunately not those ones that society tends to value. And so reading that, I would say I got depressed. I mean,
Oh,
Clovis had to pull me away from the computer because he's like, stop it, you're going to get into a spiral, come out of it, come out of it. But it was tough because I wanted to learn, I wanted to know. But then once I saw that, it was very discouraging. So for a good couple of months, I feel like I was in a really dark place. Just very sad. How I describe it is like if you remember cartoons and you'd have that dark cloud following you wherever you go, like everything else is sunny, but you
the
just over
little
here.
rain cloud following over your head kind of thing.
That's
Yeah.
how I felt. I
Yeah.
felt like that. And it was tough. It was really tough. When he got the diagnosis, I think the doctor recommended Variety Village. I think they recommended the Geneva Center for Autism, and I think they recommended you all, Community Living Toronto, for
Okay.
support. And it was like, okay, be on your way and best of luck. And that's what you walked out with in 2000, 2001. So after a couple of months of crying and sadness and soul searching and praying and not praying, I realized, okay, Sherron, you got to get up and you got to start fighting for your kid. He right now has a lot more deficits of all I was seeing at this time. He has a lot of deficits, but there's more in there. And if he's going to survive in this world that can tend to be harsh towards difference, you got to fight for your son. Clovis, it took him a little bit longer, which I think tends to be the pattern with a lot of fathers. It took him a little longer to jump on board. I think he had to work through things a little bit more emotionally. Once he got on board, I think we became a duo, a power duo.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, as I think in most cases, as mom, we put on that cape and I just went and got out there and got involved. And as I used to say, I was getting my PhD in autism, like anything,
Yeah.
any book, any article, any workshop, I was doing it so I could learn more so that as I'm empowered, I could support my son.
Yeah, that's remarkable, and you certainly have that reputation. That's how I've known you, right? As a strong person, strong advocate, understanding of systems and people, and generous with your understanding, but also firm in what you know. So that's interesting that you started with that right off the bat. That was your approach. You mentioned something around how Clovis accepted Isaiah and that diagnosis and that. So I'd be interested in just some, and you mentioned that that's often the pattern for men and fathers, dads, as they come to grips with a diagnosis like this. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit. And the reason I ask is we've started, and we're actually doing a podcast shortly with a guy named Tom Gaspar in Community Living Toronto, who started a dad's group to
Awesome.
get men together to talk about what they're going through as well. But anyway, Clovis, what was that? What was that like for you as his wife to watch him
Right.
go through that?
Yeah. So, I think Clovis had a cerebral understanding,
Yeah.
probably even more so than I did, because his background in school was psychology. So I think he probably and he used to work in a mental health ward in downtown Toronto. So I think he had even a deeper understanding of autism and the challenges that it would present for our son and for our family. So I think he had to wrestle with it. So he wasn't really ready to talk it out. Um, we were, the only ones in our family with a child with any type of disability to our knowledge. At church, we were one of a few families, and it was later that we created a group at our church because there was a few of us as young families who were now having children with some type of developmental disability, but we were all on an island. So eventually we came together, and then we created this group where moms and dads came together to talk about it. But before that group was created, we kind of all were on our island. And I think women are more willing and more open to seek out help and to
Help and
talk
support.
and
Yeah.
right and to be vulnerable and so on. Men, their socialization is maybe to talk things out. That's not socialized as being strong, as being male. Those are more feminine actions, not
Yeah.
masculine actions, which is completely silly. But I think that's how generally men are socialized in many cultures. And so I don't think he really had anyone to talk to or that he felt comfortable talking to
Right.
until we started to create the group at church, and he started to connect with some of the other gentlemen at church, and then it moved from there. So he had to work it out on his own, whereas I'm naturally more extroverted and I was willing to talk it out. He had to work it through on his own, and I needed to be patient with him. I find a lot of men, their support is in going to work and putting food on the table and paying for the therapies or paying for the resources, which
Right.
is important. And and
Hmm.
and that's how they give. But we, as their partners, their wives, their spouses, we also need that emotional connection. We need them to be with us to cry it out, to shout it out, to scream it out, to pray it out. And so sometimes it takes the men a little longer to get on board. They will get there. We got to give them that time. But that's been my observation with Clovis, and we too with the support group we founded. We're trying to create a men's group within the Black community as well.
Yeah.
And that's what we're finding is we just got to pull them together first with that commonality of having a child or a loved one with a disability, but don't make it all about talking about the disability. Let's just
Right.
come together and just be in the same space, and we'll take a few moments to talk about it, but we don't want a whole hour talking about feelings. That's just not a guy,
Yeah.
right? That's just
Yeah.
not, I mean, I've
Yeah.
raised two sons. That's not a guy thing, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
that's my observation with Clovis and then some of the other male friends that we've met throughout our
Yeah. Yeah.
journey.
That's good observations. There's a lot there. The one of the things you sort of touched on as a sort of thread throughout your story is the importance of community
Yes.
and the people, family, your church community, your broader community.
Yeah.
From the two teachers at the church that were sort of said, there's something there, go take a look, to you forming a group at your church. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the importance of community to you and your family? And then maybe how did you, like, it sounds like you pulled these things together because you needed them, right?
Right.
How did that come to be?
So the group at church, because there's two groups I guess we've been a part of. There's the group at church, and then the separate group that, Clovis and I, we've created outside
Yeah.
of our church. So the group at church, I guess there was us and some other really good friends of ours, um, who had adopted a little guy, and he came with some challenges. And so I believe, if I remember correctly, we went to our one of our pastors and we said, "Hey, we're catching wind that there are other families in our church, East End, West End, and so on, because we were kind of broadly spread, who have children with some type of developmental disability, physical challenges, and so on. Maybe it'll be good for us to come together." Because I guess also the church needed it, because we're bringing our children to Sunday school, and
Yeah.
right, the people serving in the Sunday schools like, oh my gosh, I've never dealt with a child like this. Because, for example, with autism, there are no physically defining features. So they
Right.
look normal. Hate to use that word, but they look
Yeah. Yeah.
normal,
Yeah.
but they're not acting like that. So is this a discipline thing? Are these parents, do they need some parenting workshops? And here's a book, and, because they don't understand autism. They don't understand.
Did you have those moments where you're in the service and then they come up and say, you need to come and get Isaiah because, he's
Oh, yeah.
acting up, or yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. All of us were going through that. So now we're going to our pastor and saying, okay, how can we work around this? Like, we're learning. we're new to this journey. The church is learning. They're new to this journey. We don't want to stop coming to church. They don't want us to stop coming to church because that's not right.
Yeah.
How do
Yeah.
we work through this? So then we decided to form a group. And it was lovely. There was a couple who they have children, but none of their children have any challenges like that. But they had
Right.
the heart to support us because none of us had the bandwidth to lead it. We're just trying to figure things out. So they led it, and we came together like once a month on a Sunday afternoon after service was done. So wherever our services were, we found a central
Okay.
meeting spot, and it was just organic. And it was just nice to know that there were others out there on a similar path, coming together, supporting one another, sharing resources. And so in certain ways, like we grew, we learned, but it also affirmed what we were feeling, our
Yeah.
stresses, our strains, our worries. It was good. It was a good time.
That's good. I mean, I grew up going to a church, a Baptist church, and one of the things that stands out from me from that experience just was that sense of community, where
Yes.
you've got people of all ages, right? So, I'm 10 or 5 or whatever, and I've got I would call them friends who were in their 60s, 70s, and
Yeah.
80s, right? Or, couples that were not my parents that you could go to in this
Yes.
idea of community. And I think a lot of churches have really built that sense of community. And then in the disability world, you often hear people talk about some of their most meaningful connections are coming from churches or faith communities and
Right.
being welcomed and accepted there.
Right. And it was important because the church and the membership needed to evolve.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't always perfect. There, unfortunately, were points where, Isaiah did do some things. He did hurt some people,
Yeah.
not maliciously, but he did. And so there reached a point where there was conflict with some members, and some members went to our pastor and questioned why we were allowed to still be coming to church and bringing our son. He's violent, he's this, he's that. And so there was a point where we stopped going to church after a while. And then we started to take turns. Clovis would go
Yeah.
and I would stay home with Zay. And so we went through that ebb and flow in our faith journey, in the church journey. But then things moved to a point where Clovis and I were asked to come and speak to the church about disability, where I was asked
Okay.
to come to speak to those who were serving in the children's ministry and to teach them about disability and difference. So from a spiritual point of view, but also from a educational service point of view. And
Right.
so now today, Isaiah loves going to church. There are times where Clovis and I want to be lazy and watch it on YouTube. And I say, let's go, let's go. And we jump in the car and we go, and he has his seat in the front row. And I don't know how much he gets out of service, but he loves it. He loves the singing. There was a time where he would listen to the singing and then go into the lobby and hang out there while the message was going on. Guess too
Right.
much of this. Now he's now he sits through the entire service, and people love it.
Good.
People appreciate his presence. People appreciate the teaching, the natural teaching our presence as a family has brought to the congregation. So,
Yeah.
my message to other families listening, and as we've mentioned, in various faith groups and various faith communities, is, our family can be a testimony and can be that shining light to help
Mhm.
change the hearts of some of your membership who just don't have that understanding but need it. And it's probably even better than a textbook, is just
Yeah.
that lived experience and just sitting in the same space with you week after
It's
week.
it's putting the sort of faith and the teachings into practice
Come
in a
on.
practical way. I've got a couple of friends of mine that did a documentary on the church that I grew up in. I don't go there anymore, and I do miss some of those elements, but it's called The Little Church.
Okay.
And it's about just that kind of thing, not just about disability, but that's part of it. But just people living in a community. This happens to be in Weston, coming together in their experience over generations
Yeah.
in a little church, and
Yeah.
how important that is. So that's very cool. Now you and Clovis started something very unique and focused in the last little while called Sawubona. Sawubona. I'm probably pronouncing it not quite correctly, but talk about that. What is Sawubona? What's your mission?
No,
And how did you come up with the idea?
Uh, so the organization is Sawubona Afrocentric Circle of Support. Sawubona is a Zulu or South African greeting, which means I see you. But it's not just I see you, I'm looking at you, but I see you, I value you. And we changed it. So when we first started out the group, we just referred to ourselves as the Black Parent Support Group. BPSG was our cute little acronym that I came up with. And we started in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic. And then we changed the name to Sawubona, getting input from our parent members. And I love that word Sawubona because a lot of the families came to the group sharing that they didn't feel seen, feeling that their child or their loved one wasn't being seen in the education system or amongst their circle of friends and family. And so they wanted to be in a space where they were seen, they were heard, they were acknowledged. And really the growth of Sawubona came out a lot of the lived experiences that we've just been talking about for the last few minutes of joining the parent group with Community Living Toronto in Scarborough, where I live. And a lot of the wonderful relationships that I built there, many of those ladies that if we bump into each other, it's like no time has passed. Some of them we've seen each other on different committees. And so it's been lovely. So I started there. And then we created that group at our own church. And Clovis, I saw how much it fed us and how much it built us up and strengthened us at points when we were really low. And so over the years, as I continue to visit different support groups, unfortunately, a lot of the mainstream groups, they were good, but there was always something missing.
Yeah.
I felt alone because there really was often not a lot of racialized people in the space. And when I wanted to speak about topics that were particular to me, so for example, my son being a Black man who looks typical, who looks normal, but he's still a large Black man. I mean, my son today is about 6'3", 200 plus pounds, doesn't always use a lot of language. And so always that fear of trouble with the justice system, always that fear that when he wants to go and touch a lady's bracelet or a lady's beaded necklace, that she's going to call the cops on him. And Lord, what's going to happen? Concerns about school. Is he going to be cared about? Is he going to be worked with? Is there going to be deficit thinking where he's concerned and that inclination to send him home the moment he does something wrong? And will that be based on his disability or the color of his skin? So those kinds of issues that were going through my mind when I wanted to bring those things up at certain meetings, I didn't feel like either the people moderating those meetings had the skills, had the understanding, or wanted to go there. And so I stopped going to some of those meetings. I just didn't feel like I was getting anything else out of it. So then I started to go back again when he was a teenager. Took a break, started to go back again when he was a teenager, but it was the same thing. Now I'm starting to meet other Black families, and we're talking about seeing a lot of affinity groups building up. So we're seeing linguistic groups. I'm seeing emails come out, about if you're Cantonese or Mandarin speaking, or if you're French speaking. And I know there's, JVC, Jewish Vocational Services, and there's SAC and Scarborough, South Asian Autism Awareness. So we're seeing all these different groups, forming that are meeting linguistic and cultural needs. And that's great. But where's something for Black people? Who's doing something for Black people? So as I'm meeting different moms along my journey, we're talking about, we wish someone would create an affinity group for us. So then I, being Sherron Grant, went to my husband and said, hey, honey, let's start something for the Black community. Not intending for it to be big, Brad. Just let's tap on a few shoulders of some of the families that we've met over the years and have them into our living room. We can, go from house to house, and it took off. I mean, it was during the pandemic. We had an article written, a blog written by Louise Kinross from Holland Bloorview. Then from there, someone heard about us and did a spread in the Toronto Star. From there, we got a couple of CTV interviews. Like, it just took off. And then from there, people found us. People literally said, I've been searching for a group like this. I'm so happy I found you. I'm so happy you formed this. And so we started off in 2020, so November 2020, with one virtual meeting a month. By
Oh,
January,
that's deep. That's deep COVID. You guys were, that was way to go.
right? And
Yeah.
so we started off one meeting a month, November 2020. Family said we need more, so we
Yeah.
bumped it to two meetings a month come the new year. And then due to some grant funding we've
Yeah.
received, now we've grown and we've hired a couple of part-time staff. We're doing some in-person events now that, we're kind of out of that pandemic mode, and here we are.
Yeah, in terms of, it's fantastic. In terms of impact, I sat in on one of the sessions you did. I think it was at the Community Living Ontario conference
Yeah, yeah.
last year, and you had two of your staff there. Excellent presentation, but
Thank
also when you
you.
talked about the impact, and what was helpful for me, and you talked about it earlier when I asked you about this, was just like, so like sometimes the question is, well, what's wrong with the groups that are already there? Like, why can't people just come together and bring their differences to there, celebrate the differences and all that? And you're talking about some really culturally specific or other issues that are important to have in a group that has a shared cultural background or other shared. I think values is probably the wrong word, but certainly shared experiences. So, can you talk about the importance of that?
Sure. And yes, I've been asked that question a few times, even in some of the radio interviews I've done. There's nothing wrong with the mainstream groups. I mean,
Yeah,
that's how I got my start in this
yeah,
world. That those groups propped me up. Those groups got me out of my dark cloud. But there was something missing. And when you're in a group, see, when you're of the mainstream, I mean, I guess there's a saying that, does a fish know that it's wet? I'm paraphrasing though. But if that fish is swimming around in water and that's all they know,
yeah,
right? How do they know that they're wet? And so often the people who are questioning the creation of these affinity groups, they are usually a part of that mainstream and they don't
yeah,
understand what it's like to live life outside of that pond,
yeah,
outside of the water, and the needs that you have. And unfortunately, the negative experiences that you have, that you need a space to talk about it, to find out, okay, am I crazy here? Like, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Am I feeling what I'm feeling? Is there something wrong with this system or is there something wrong with me? And so
right.
in having that group, we come together to affirm that no, the system in certain ways is broken. The system needs some revamping, it needs some work. Mainstream organizations are doing a great job, but there are blind spots that they're missing. And
Yeah,
so the
100%.
creation of Sawubona is to address some of those blind spots.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency, working in a mainstream agency to sometimes get defensive when those things are brought to your attention, right? No, 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 we
Right.
can do this too. And I think what you're saying is there needs to be permission on both sides to whether it's a cultural organization or cultural groups, or even within our own staff, we have employee resource groups, right?
Yeah.
When what people are trying to you're trying to build up people's confidence in a place where they belong, where you just have to explain a lot less and you're accepted and belong for who you are without covering all that stuff. So it's not
Exactly.
for or against, it's part of,
Absolutely.
is the way we've sort of conceptualized it.
You said it well. I constantly say to our families, like, we're not the be all and end all. Like, be a part of a couple of groups
Yeah,
because they may meet a different need, a cultural need, or maybe a support network that's focused on housing, or a support network, if your child specifically has a specific exceptionality, such as Fragile X syndrome, or a brain injury, or a learning disability, join those groups as well. And then you take from those different groups what
yeah,
you need to create that fulsome picture of what you need in supporting your loved one.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And I also think it's important for um, us in Canada to stand up for and be very clear around the value of everyone's differences, especially what's going on in the States and watching the way sort of DEI A has been turned into a bad word, right? And I always want to
Hmm.
think, well, if you, like, what of those three letters don't you don't believe in diversity, you don't believe in equity, and you don't believe in inclusion? Like, well, I don't know where that's coming from, but I
Right.
think in Canada we should be stand up and say, no, we value our diversity, we value our equity, and we want to be inclusive. So all these things can exist together without being pitted against each other. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad that we've got, you mentioned a number of agencies, SAC and JVS, and there's others that do great work, and we should be proud of the fact that we've got communities that support these organizations, and we can all work together
Yeah.
towards common goals.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
Absolutely. I
So,
mean, the
yeah,
truth is, there wouldn't, if mainstream was doing it right, there
yeah,
wouldn't be a need for
yeah,
DEI initiatives. And that's, unfortunately what our brothers and sisters to the
yeah,
South are missing. Like if people felt included, if people felt like their identities were included and respected
yeah,
and that they really had a fair shot, then you wouldn't have a need for these initiatives. And
yeah,
hopefully at some point, if not in our lifetime, maybe our
yeah,
grandchildren's lifetime,
yeah,
we won't need these initiatives so much
yeah,
because people of all walks of life will have a fair shot at
yeah,
success in this life.
yeah. Well said. Um, Sawubona, what are you up to now, and how can people become involved and learn more?
All right. So we continue our regular routine of virtual sessions, in-person events. So our next big event is going to be a retreat, a one-day family retreat on
Right.
May 24th. Um, uh, people can continue to join us up so they can go to our website. So I'm not sure if at the end, if you've kind of have links.
We will put
Beautiful.
that up there.
And
Yeah.
so membership is free. We are a not-for-profit. We're
Mhm.
incorporated. If people want to donate, hey, donations are always welcome. And we work through our mentor organization, Taibu Community Health Center, and they can provide tax receipts for anyone who wants to donate
Great.
to
Great.
Sawubona. But we have our website, so everything we do for our families is free. Our in-person events, our virtual events. We have a service navigator who can work with families who, again, want that cultural lens of that hand holding, maybe just one-on-one talk, maybe just support with regards to an educational issue or a health issue, just some questions, some direction. We have a resource directory on our website, and what makes ours a little bit different is it is focused on institutions or organizations that focus on the Black community. So they
Right.
can find information about mainstream organizations on many, many other groups, but we really have restricted ours to B3 and Black focused, Black serving, Black led organizations.
Great.
Again, so that people in the community can know that these
Yep.
agencies exist, and even mainstream agencies that want to ally and partner and collaborate with these agencies, they can find them on our resource directory.
Great.
So we continue to move forward. We continue to write grants so we can continue to have the funding that we need to keep doing the work that our families tell us they want us to do, that agencies tell us that they want us to
Yeah.
continue to do, to
Great.
partner, to advise, to support. So that's what we're doing.
Great. Great work. Great initiative. Loved learning more about what you do. And as Community Living Toronto, we're committed to supporting in any way that we can. We're also open to hearing how we can change and do better,
Yep.
to support the Black community and other groups as well. I think that's we need to get better at listening.
I
We
love
always,
that. And that's where
yes,
you start. That's where it starts is authentic listening. I love that.
great. One final question, and I feel like we've covered this throughout this, but it's a question we ask everyone, so I'm going to keep on it. Sherron, what does belonging mean to you?
Belonging, I it's such a beautiful word. It really means community. Um, it it's I think it's as I said earlier, there would be no need for DEI initiatives if we were respecting, acknowledging, and naturally embracing difference,
Right.
diversity, if we're embracing it, normalizing it, not making excuses as to why we can't include. So when we get to a point where all of that is just considered normal, then I think that's belonging, that everybody feels that they're a part of something bigger than themselves, and that everybody feels like they can and are contributing to the society at large.
Great. Excellent answer.
Thank you.
Sherron, thanks for taking the time today. And more importantly, thanks for all the work that you and Clovis are doing with Sawubona. Wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Brad. And thanks to
Thanks.
Community Living Toronto. I mean, you've been with me since the beginning of my journey, not you per se, Brad,
Yeah.
but the agency itself has been with me and my family since the beginning. So I love being here. What did we say? 25 years later,
Yeah.
and being able to stand strong and be able to give back this way. So thanks for inviting me for
Great.
the interview. And I
Great.
really hope it makes a difference in the lives of those who listen to us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Take care,
Okay.
Brad.
Take care. You too.
I'm really grateful for Sherron for taking some time out of her busy schedule as an educator and a mom and leader of a volunteer group to chat with us. Sawubona is doing great work, and I'd really encourage you to check out their website. There's a link in the description for this podcast, and you may even want to donate a few dollars to their work. Thanks for joining our Community Chats podcast, and remember, we release a new episode on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Don't forget to join us next time as we unpack the power of community through collaborative initiatives and shared experiences. Available on Buzzsprout, Spotify, Audible, and YouTube. Follow us on social media at CL Toronto. Let's chat, share, and spread those good vibes together. We hope these discussions will inspire you and give new ideas to add your voice to our mission of making our communities and neighborhoods inclusive and welcoming.